Tonight, you are not drifting into the romance of Tudor England. You are drifting beneath it, into the hush where a woman's body could belong to family, church, husband, and law before it ever belonged to her. And the worst part is not what you think. From a distance, the age still glows, velvet sleeves, chapel bells, candlelight trembling on carved wood. But if you move closer, the beauty thins, beneath it waits a life shaped by duty, watched by custom, narrowed by marriage, and shadowed by the nearness of birth, pain, and shame. This is not really a story about romance at all. It is a story about what it felt like to live inside a system that made intimacy dangerous long before anyone closed the bed curtains. Tonight, you are not drifting into the romance of Tudor England. You are drifting beneath it, into the hush where a woman's body could belong to family, church, husband, and law, before it ever belonged to her. And the worst part is not what you think. From a distance, the age still glows, velvet sleeves, chapel bells, candlelight trembling on carved wood. But if you move closer, the beauty thins, beneath it waits a life shaped by duty, watched by custom, narrowed by marriage, and shadowed by the nearness of birth, pain, and shame. This is not really a story about romance at all. It is a story about what it felt like to live inside a system that made intimacy dangerous long before anyone closed the bed curtains. Because the true unease of Tudor life was not only filth, illness, or the obvious cruelty of powerful men. It was the arrangement beneath ordinary things, the way marriage could arrive as destiny before it ever felt like choice. The way sex could be treated as duty, duty as proof, proof as honor, and honor as something a woman carried in her body whether she wanted to or not. Even tenderness had to survive inside rules made by other people. History often paints this world in warm colors. A little gold on a portrait, a little music in a hall, a little softness around the candle flame. But underneath that glow was a life of watchfulness, pressure, and quiet endurance. A woman could be promised young, judged quickly, and folded into a future where birth, shame, obedience, and silence sat close together, as natural as furniture in a room. That is the hidden weight we are drifting toward tonight. And you do not need to hold all of it at once. You only need to listen. Let the breath slow. Let the room around you stay gentle and still. Let the story come in softly, one layer at a time, while you remain here, warm and untouched by it, able to drift above the dark water without sinking in. So before anything else, let's begin where every Tudor day begins, in the cold, damp half-light of morning. Stay where you are for one more quiet moment. Feel the bed beneath you now, or the chair, or the stillness of the room that holds you. There is a door somewhere nearby. There is air you do not have to share. There is a night or a morning that is asking nothing from your body. You are only listening, only drifting. Tudor England is far from you, and it can remain far, even as we move slowly toward it. Now let the distance thin. It is morning there, though the word morning sounds kinder than the thing itself. The day does not arrive in gold. It seeps in as a pale gray wash through a narrow opening, weak light touching old wood, rough cloth, and the shallow shape of a room that never feels entirely dry. The bed beneath you sags at the center. The stuffing shifts with a faint papery rustle. Straw presses through thin fabric. Linen lies cool against the skin, worn smooth in some places, stiff in others, as though it has remembered too many nights. The cold is not clean. It carries damp timber, old smoke, sleeping breath, and the faint heaviness of bodies kept too close together. Someone nearby exhales through parted lips. A child stirs. A bird gives a small complaint beneath another sleeper's weight. No one means to intrude, and yet intrusion is built into the room itself. Family, servants, children, all gathered within the same narrow space, divided only by darkness, habit, and the courtesy of pretending not to notice. That is the first truth of the Tudor morning, before desire, before marriage, before anyone speaks of duty, The room has already said enough. It tells you that privacy is scarce, that rest is shared, that even silence belongs to more than one person. And if a life begins each day like this, close, watched, overheard, then intimacy will never enter as something fully private or fully free. Even before intimacy, the room itself is already telling you what kind of life this will be. Still, the scene remains hushed in its own warm way. Gray light on old boards, a rough blanket holding its last little warmth, quiet breathing in the half-light, the soft, dry whisper of straw whenever a body shifts. It is a sleepy world, but not a solitary one, so remain here only as a listener, warm in your own room, while that older room settles gently into view. And once you notice the room, you begin to notice the body living inside it. The house is awake before anyone speaks, not with comfort, but with the small tired sounds of another night giving way. A rope bed gives a low creak. Straw shifts inside a mattress that has forgotten softness. The blanket is warmer near the center, colder at the edge. Cloth rests against the skin, with the faint smell of smoke, sleep, and age. Nothing feels new. Everything has been used, mended, breathed on, and kept a little longer than anyone would choose. The bed is not really a refuge. It is a frame of wood, ropes drawn tight, then slackened by time, and a mattress filled with old straw or rough chaff. If you lie still, it is almost tolerable. If you turn, the room hears you. Straw whispers. Even the act of settling your shoulder or bending a knee seems to wake the bed into speech. Around the bed, the rest of the house presses in. Smoke from the hearth has climbed into the rafters and stayed there. Damp rises from the floorboards. Wool keeps the scent of the body. Linen keeps the memory of many nights. Somewhere nearby, there is old ash, old broth, old wood, old breath. If animals are brought close against the cold, and often they are, then their smell enters the room as well. A dog in the corner, a hen tucked somewhere in shadow, the human world and the animal one sharing the same narrow air. And then there are these smaller lives hidden in the seams. Something faint in the straw, something unseen in the blanket, a light sting at the wrist, an itch at the ankle, fleas, lice, bedbugs, whatever has made its home in the stuffing and the cloth, in the cracks of the bedstead. You do not always see them. You simply learn them by feeling, a crawl, a bite, the quiet discipline of not scratching too much, not moving too sharply, not waking the room around you. Because you are not alone, that may be the hardest part of the room. Someone sleeps close enough to hear a sigh, a child beneath the same blanket, a servant on a pallet, family only a few feet away, divided by darkness more than distance. There may be a curtain, but it cannot stop sound, it cannot stop smell, it cannot make a private life out of shared air, so intimacy in Tudor England does not begin in softness. It begins in a room already hostile to comfort. Before desire, before shame, before duty is named, the body has already learned the lesson of the house. Closeness without privacy, warmth without ease, rest without solitude. Even before intimacy, the room itself is already telling you what kind of life this will be. Still, the house breathes around you slowly, gray light at the shutter, smoke thinning under the beams, straw murmuring. When someone turns, old wood holding its tired silence, the whole room seems to inhale and exhale around people inside it. And once the room feels real, the next question becomes harder. What did people do with the bodies trapped inside it? In this world, a girl begins to acquire value long before she acquires freedom. At first, it is only a change in atmosphere. Voices lower when she enters the room. A mother grows watchful. A father begins to think ahead. Neighbors notice how quickly childhood is thinning at the edges. No one needs to say very much. The lesson arrives anyway. Her future will be measured not only by what she can do, but by what she can preserve. Purity, obedience, marriageability, these are not simply moral virtues. They are social currency. They can steady a household, improve an alliance, soften a debt, secure a match, protect a family name. Even in ordinary homes, where life is more practical than grand, the same logic settles over a daughter early. She is no longer only herself, she is possibility, reputation, arrangement. So the room we have just left behind, with its stale air and shared sleep, now takes on a second meaning. It is not only uncomfortable, it is preparatory. The room is unpleasant, the rules are much worse. A girl learns those rules in fragments. Do not stay out too long. Do not be seen alone. Do not answer too warmly. Do not give people a story to tell. What looks like caution is often surveillance in gentler clothing. What sounds like care is often fear of what a rumor can do. Because once marriage becomes part of the future, the body is no longer treated as private. It becomes familial, economic, even political. A daughter may become a dowry, a bridge between households, producing heirs, a way of keeping land, duty, and loyalty flowing in the proper direction. Her sexuality is rarely imagined as inward or personal. It is treated as something that belongs to the structure around her. And that structure does not ask whether she feels ready. It asks whether she is useful. That is the quieter horror beneath all of this. Not simply that life is hard, but that usefulness matters more than experience. Pleasure barely enters the calculation. Desire matters less than obedience. Curiosity matters less than silence. A woman's inner life may be real, rich, frightened, resistant, tender, but the world around her is trained to look past it toward outcome, reputation, marriage, children. So the pressure settles early, into posture, into caution, into the habit of watching oneself from the outside. A girl begins to carry her own body as though it is both precious and dangerous, something that must be protected not because it belongs to her, but because it reflects on everyone else. And once a girl is seen as value to be protected, the body itself comes under surveillance. And once a girl is seen as value to be protected, the body itself comes under surveillance. And the body, in Tudor England, is not often allowed the comfort of feeling clean. Washing exists, but in fragments: a basin, a bucket, cold water lifted in the dark, a rough linen cloth over the face, the hands, the neck, perhaps beneath the arms if the morning allows it. Soap is costly, privacy is scarce, warm water is rarer still. A full bath belongs more to occasion than habit, more to illness, travel, ceremony, or luxury than to ordinary life. Meanwhile, the body goes on. It sweats beneath wool and linen. It works near smoke and damp timber. It sleeps in old bedding and wakes in old air. Hair keeps the day in it. Breath keeps the night. Skin gathers salt, soot, and the heaviness of repeated use. The shift absorbs what it can. The room gives it back: cloth, skin, smoke, straw, wool, cloth, skin, smoke, straw, wool. And there is a contradiction woven through all of it. Cleanliness is admired in the abstract, but too much attention to the body can look suspicious. Public bathing has fallen under the shadow of vice. Scent, grooming, freshening, too much of it may suggest vanity or temptation. Too little washing brings misery. Too much concern for washing invites judgment. So many women live in the narrow space between discomfort and blame. The medical thinking of the age only deepens it. Bad air is feared. Foul smells are linked to illness. Hot water is mistrusted because it seems to open the body and leave it vulnerable. Better, some think, to stay sealed, layered, protected. Better to wipe than soak. Better to endure than indulge. So the senses must carry what custom permits: old rushes underfoot, smoke caught in cloth, sweat beneath sleeves, a mouth cleaned only lightly, if at all, teeth rubbed with cloth or herbs when available, but never truly fresh. Fleas in the straw, lice in the seams, rough wool at the wrist, perfume over stale air, a scented glove, a comb. That is the quieter misery of it. Intimacy becomes a burden to the senses before it becomes a burden to the heart. By the time another body draws near, the room is already close, the bedding already tired, the skin already warm with the day, the breath already human in the least romantic sense. Nearness does not begin in softness. It begins in heat, odor, fatigue, and fabric. And still, the pattern repeats: bucket, cloth, smoke, wool, linen, breath, straw. A little scent if there is any, a little hope that no one notices too much. As bad as the body feels, the first night is worse. And after a life of silence, ignorance, and supervision, all of that leads to one room, one bed, and one wedding night. And after a life of silence, ignorance, and supervision, all of that leads to one room, one bed, and one wedding night. By the time the night arrives, fear has already entered before the husband does. The girl may know almost nothing, and what she does know has come in fragments, half whispered by older women, blurred by embarrassment, wrapped in warnings rather than understanding. Be still, be modest, do not resist too much, do not seem eager, expect pain, say little, endure it well. Advice like that settles over the mind like a second veil, thin but hard to lift. No one has prepared her in any useful way. No one has given her a clear map of the body, or a language for what is about to happen. Knowledge comes twisted through superstition, through rumor, through scraps of religious fear and household instruction. She may have heard that a good wife obeys, that a pure girl blushes, that the body opens when it must, that suffering is natural, that modesty matters even in the dark. She may have heard practical things too, but softened into nonsense by discomfort. Lie still, breathe shallowly, think of children, think of duty, think of God, almost anything. In other words, except herself, and the world around her is scarcely more informed. The learned men of the age carry theories that sound orderly on the page and collapse inside real human experience. Female anatomy is poorly understood, often described by comparison rather than comprehension, as though a woman's body were merely a variation on a male one, turned inward, lesser, stranger, harder to explain. Ancient authorities linger over everything, old errors wear the clothes of wisdom, heat, cold, moisture, humors, seed, temperament. The body is discussed constantly and known so little. So the night arrives weighted with expectation and emptiness at once. A husband is meant to know what to do, though he may know only slightly more than his bride. Confidence in such a world often hides ignorance. He has inherited assumptions, not understanding. She has inherited silence. Between them stands the bed, the room, the dark, the whole machinery of custom pressing inward. What is required of her is not pleasure, not curiosity, not comfort, and not any mutual discovery. What is required is performance. She must be modest enough to seem virtuous, frightened enough to seem untouched, obedient enough to submit, patient enough to bear pain without turning it into scandal. Even distress has its expected form, too calm, and she may seem suspect, too resistant, and she may seem difficult, too expressive, and she risks seeming immodest. The body is no longer only a body. It has become testimony. That is the deeper sadness of the wedding night. A girl is not entering romance. She is entering usefulness. The room may be quiet, but the system surrounding it is not. Marriage has been arranged, approved, witnessed, blessed, and anticipated not because two inner lives are finally allowed to meet in peace, but because families, households, property, lineage, and reputation are now ready to claim their return. The night is supposed to make something official. It is supposed to turn value into proof. So let the pace slow here. Let the candle burn low. Let the air remain hushed, even under all that pressure. There is fear in the room, yes, and confusion, and the heavy stillness of two people stepping into roles larger than themselves. But beneath it all is something even quieter. The soft banishing of the bride's private self beneath the expectations laid over her. And in Tudor England, That first night does not end when the door closes. In some ways, it only begins when others come looking for proof. But even that is not the public part yet. For a moment, come back to where you are now, to the clean weight of your own blanket, to the quiet fact of a room with walls that belong to you, to the privacy so ordinary you hardly have to think about it. You can turn over without waking a household. You can ask questions without shame. You can name the body in plain language. You can know what is happening before it happens. Even that simple knowledge is a kind of shelter. Stay there for a breath, because what lingers after that Tudor wedding night is not only pain or fear, or the awkwardness of two strangers placed inside a ceremony too large for them. It is the deeper cost of being brought to the threshold of marriage without words, without choice, and without any permission to belong to yourself first. A girl is expected to cross into womanhood, carrying obedience where understanding should have been. She is told to be modest where she should have been informed, silent where she should have been guided, useful where she should have been seen. And that silence is not an accident. It is part of the design. If you are not taught the body, you are easier to govern through it. If you do not have language for fear, discomfort, or desire, then other people may name those things for you. They may call obedience virtue, confusion innocence, pain duty. They may leave you no room to describe your own experience, except in terms they have already approved. So breathe again. Let your shoulders soften. You are only listening from a safe distance, from a world where knowledge can be spoken plainly, and where a closed door can still mean privacy. The body has survived the night, but now society wants evidence. And now the private wound becomes public. Virginity, in Tudor England, is not treated as a feeling or a mystery, or even a private condition of the body. It is treated as value, as proof, as family honor gathered into one fragile idea, and placed inside a girl before she is old enough to understand the weight of it. By the time a bride reaches her wedding night, her body has already been carrying other people's expectations for years. Parents, neighbors, future in-laws, perhaps an entire household, all looking toward the same invisible question. Has she remained untouched? Has she preserved what was meant to be preserved? Has she arrived at marriage as promise rather than problem? That's what makes virginity feel less like innocence and more like currency. It can secure a match, protect a name, quiet suspicion, strengthen an alliance, and because so much has been placed upon it, the culture begins demanding signs, rituals, little pieces of reassurance that the body will behave according to the story people want from it. So the wedding night does not remain entirely inside the room. Outside it, people wait for evidence. A blood-stained sheet may be expected, not everywhere, not always, but often enough to cast a long shadow over the bed itself. The cloth must speak. The body must leave its mark in a way others can understand. And if it does not, then silence rushes in, followed quickly by rumor. Was she truly pure? Was something missing? Was something hidden? Had she been careless, willing, damaged, deceptive? A single unstained piece of linen can begin to gather questions. No bride is allowed to answer on her own terms. The cruelest part is how little the body cares for these rules. Some women bleed, some do not, some are tense with fear, some are numb with exhaustion, some have bodies that do not produce the visible proof others expect. But biology is forced to serve belief, and belief is rarely patient. So the bedchamber becomes a kind of courtroom. The bride is no longer simply a person who has endured a painful and bewildering night. She becomes evidence. Her body is read, her silence is read, the sheet is read. Other people may inspect, speculate, whisper, or worse, call for some humiliating confirmation from women assigned. The most intimate threshold of her life is turned outward and translated into reputation. And even if she passes, there is no tenderness in victory. Only relief, perhaps, relief that the household is satisfied, relief that the whispers may quiet for now, relief that her body has produced the sign required of it, whether by truth, by chance, or by the simple willingness of others to accept the performance and move on. So let the noise fall back for a moment. Let the crowd outside the bedchamber fade. Let the house grow still again. Inside herself, the bride is not thinking of ceremony or honor. She is thinking of soreness, confusion, fatigue, the strange loneliness of being turned into a verdict. She has crossed one threshold only to find that the crossing itself has been watched, measured, and made to mean more for everyone else than it could ever mean for her. And even if she passes the test, she has not escaped. Because once purity is proven, the body moves immediately to its next duty. Because once purity is proven, the body moves immediately to its next duty. Marriage may arrive at slightly different speeds depending on the household, but the logic beneath it barely changes. In a great house, the match may be discussed in letters, weighed against land, loyalty, money, and advantage. In a poorer one, it may be shaped by labor, local custom, debt, and the narrow circle of possible futures. But whether the room is noble or humble, the girl at the center of it is still being moved toward the same end. She's being prepared to leave one household and become useful in another. For some, that future begins painfully early. A noble girl may be promised while she is still little more than a child, her marriage imagined long before her body is ready to carry its meaning. A common girl may not have contracts drawn around her so formally, but she too feels the slow narrowing of the path. Childhood thins, eyes linger longer, conversations lower when she enters. The world begins speaking about her future, as though it has already taken shape. Courtship, when it appears, often looks gentler from the outside than it feels from within. A portrait may travel ahead of a prospective husband or wife, painted carefully, softly flattered by the artist's hand. A poem may be written in praise of beauty, modesty, sweetness, grace. A family may speak of security, duty, a good arrangement, a sensible match. But all of this soft language often covers the same harder truth. The choice belongs less to the girl than to the people who mean to place her. So romance becomes a kind of decoration around transaction. A few words, a little embroidery, a visit watched by others, a smile that must not mean too much. Perhaps the young bride sees the man only briefly before she is told that this is now her future. Perhaps she knows him hardly at all. Perhaps he is older. Perhaps he is merely strange to her. Either way, the important thing is not whether he feels familiar or kind or beloved. The important thing is that the arrangement works, and this is where the sadness deepens. A girl is no longer treated as a growing person, changing slowly into herself. She is treated as a reproductive future, a womb in waiting, a household role not yet filled. Her childhood does not end cleanly. It is folded inward, pressed flat, and relabeled as readiness. The leaving is quiet in its own way, a chest prepared, linen counted, a few possessions gathered, familiar rooms beginning to feel less hers with every passing day. Home receding before she has even stepped away from it. Her choices shrink so gradually that the shrinking may almost feel natural, which is part of what makes it so sorrowful. The path is laid down beneath her feet, and by the time she notices it, she is already walking. If she is fortunate, affection may come later, a little understanding, a little softness earned through time, but that possibility comes after the structure, not before it. The structure is what matters first, duty first, match first, future heirs first. The girl herself comes somewhere after, and marriage is only the doorway. Motherhood is the corridor waiting behind it. And from the moment she becomes a wife, everyone begins watching for the same sign. And from the moment she becomes a wife, everyone begins watching for the same sign. A missed bleeding, a change in appetite, a paleness at morning, a hand resting too often against the lower belly. In Tudor England, pregnancy does not arrive as a private discovery for long. It belongs almost immediately to the household, to hope, to scrutiny, to prediction. Before the young wife has found language for what is happening inside her, other people have already begun to read her body for meaning. At first, there is only uncertainty. She feels a strange heaviness, or a wave of sickness at dawn, or a tiredness that settles into the limbs and will not lift. Her body, still so recently claimed by marriage, now becomes more mysterious still. Older women may murmur advice. One says it is a good sign. Another warns her not to lift too much, not to startle easily, not to dwell on ugly things, not to crave the wrong foods. Everyone has a theory. No one has certainty. The body is expected to know what to do, even when the girl herself barely understands what has begun. And the explanations offered to her are shaped by the old thinking of the age. Humors, heat and cold, moisture and dryness. If something is wrong, perhaps her blood is imbalanced. Perhaps she is too warm, too weak, too anxious, too full of some hidden disturbance. If conception does not come quickly, the fault often drifts toward her. A husband may be impatient. A mother-in-law may grow sharp. Neighbors may begin to wonder. The herbs arrive. The prayers arrive. The little household remedies arrive. But beneath all of them sits the same accusation. Why has the body not done its duty? Even pregnancy itself does not free her from blame. If she is fearful, that fear may be said to shape the child. If she sees something troubling, someone may whisper that the baby will bear its mark. If the child is born sickly, quiet, difficult, or changed in some visible way, the mother may be folded into the explanation. Her thoughts, her sights, her sorrows, her body, everything becomes a possible cause. The burden settles on her from every side, and still daily life continues. There is no true pause for pregnancy. Water must still be carried. Bread must still be kneaded. Rooms must still be kept. Fires tended. Clothes mended. Guests received. Animals watched. Meals prepared. Even in wealthier houses, where labor may be lighter, the body is not granted much mystery or rest. It is observed, managed, advised, expected. A swelling belly is both vulnerability and performance. It must hold. It must endure. It must produce. Then labor comes, not as a dramatic interruption, but as the thing everyone has long been waiting for and fearing in equal measure. The room closes in. Women gather. Sheets are laid out. Water is heated. Prayers are spoken. Instructions pass from mouth to mouth in low voices. The body works through pain that may last hours or longer. Blood appears, exhaustion deepens, time loosens and loses its shape. A child may come quickly, or not. The body may tear. The bleeding may stop, or not. The mother may survive, or not. This is not considered extraordinary. It is considered part of being female. That is the true gravity of it. Childbirth is not a rare catastrophe in this world. It is an expected risk, woven into ordinary womanhood so tightly that terror and duty have almost become the same thing. And if she lives, the story does not soften much. She may be weak, sore, emptied out, still bleeding, still trying to feed an infant while the household already turns its gaze toward recovery, toward the next season, toward the next possible pregnancy. A boy brings relief. A girl brings quieter congratulations. Another loss may send the body back into prayer and blame. Another conception may be hoped for almost before strength has returned. So, let the distance widen for a moment. Let the room fall quiet again. Let the mother become more than a function in the story. She is tired. She is young, perhaps far too young. She is frightened in ways she cannot fully say. She is carrying pain inside a world that treats pain as ordinary. And still, she is expected to continue. And even after childbirth, her body is still not considered her own. And surviving birth does not buy her freedom. It often tightens the system around her. And surviving birth does not buy her freedom. It often tightens the system around her. For the modern listener, consent begins with a simple idea, that the body belongs to the self. In Tudor England, that idea barely has a place to stand. Once a woman is married, the world around her assumes access. Not occasional access, not negotiated access, but something closer to a right built quietly into the marriage itself. No one needs to announce it each night. The structure has already spoken. A wife is expected to receive her husband. That expectation sits beneath the ordinary rhythm of the house, beneath supper, beneath prayer, beneath folding of linen, and the tending of children. It remains there whether she is tired or bleeding, whether she is fearful, grieving, ill, or only just beginning to recover from birth. Her condition may be noticed, but it does not necessarily alter what is expected of her. Marriage is understood to include surrender, and surrender is treated as virtue. So dread becomes part of daily life, not because every hour is dramatic, but because uncertainty is constant. She does not always know when the claim upon her body will arrive. It may come at the end of a long day, in a room already close with smoke and fatigue. It may come while the child sleeps nearby. It may come after disappointment, after drink, after silence, after nothing at all. That is what makes the fear so exhausting. It has no single shape. It simply lives in the background, waiting. The law does not offer her much language with which to resist. A husband is not imagined as an intruder in his own marriage bed. He is imagined as the rightful head of the household, and she as the one who owes obedience within it. If she refuses too often, questions begin to gather around her character. Is she cold? Is she disobedient? Is she failing in her wifely duty? Is she withholding what is not truly hers to withhold? The body, once married, is read less as private territory than as part of the household economy. And when that expectation is joined to the pressure to conceive, the burden grows heavier still. A son is wanted, an heir is wanted. Another pregnancy may be hoped for before the body has finished healing from the last one. If no child comes, suspicion drifts toward the wife again. If only daughters come, the disappointment may settle over her like weather. The marriage bed becomes both obligation and examination, a place where affection may occasionally exist, but where function always waits underneath. Some husbands may be gentler than others, some marriages may carry a little kindness, but the structure does not depend on kindness. That is the colder truth. It works perfectly well without it. And if obedience fails in other parts of marriage, the same world that grants access to her body may also excuse her correction. A sharp word, a grip too hard on the wrist, a bruise hidden under the sleeve, discipline, some would call it, order, household governance, the language changes, but the lesson remains. Her safety depends not on recognized rights, but on the temperament of the man above her in the household order. That is why the nightmare is not one single act. It is a condition, a recurring weather inside marriage, a life in which the body is never fully off duty, never fully beyond claim, never fully returned to the self. What looks outwardly like ordinary domestic life can contain a constant inner shrinking, a steady rehearsal of endurance. So let the voice lower here, let the room grow quieter. Imagine not a scene of sudden violence, but the slower sorrow of repetition. The wife rising in the morning still tired, moving through the day already burdened by the possibility of night, carrying children, carrying work, carrying a private dread she cannot easily name aloud. The tragedy lies not only in pain, but in how ordinary it has been made to seem. And once the law is done with her body, the church takes its turn with her soul. And in Tudor England, law is only one half of the cage. And in Tudor England, law is only one half of the cage. The other half kneels beside the bed, lights a candle, and calls itself virtue. The church does not remain at the chapel door. It follows people home. It enters the marriage chamber and whispers, in warnings, in prayers spoken under the breath. It tells a woman what purity should look like, what obedience should feel like, what kind of silence is pleasing to God. Desire is not simply a private sensation here. It is a moral risk, a spiritual exposure, something to be watched as carefully as the body itself. So even within marriage, sex is not allowed to become fully human. It is pressed toward purpose, children, duty, order. The act may be permitted, but only under a narrow and anxious light. Too much pleasure darkens it. Too much appetite stains it. The body is allowed to serve, but not to linger, allowed to conceive, but not to hunger. A wife may be told to receive her husband, yet warned not to enjoy that closeness too openly, as though gratitude were holy, but delight were already leaning towards, and all around her stands a language ready to accuse. Women are linked to temptation so easily that the charge hardly needs to be spoken aloud. Eve lingers behind every sermon. A woman's body may be useful, but it is also treated as morally suspect, capable of inviting desire, and then being blamed for its arrival. If a man is weak, she may be called a temptation. If she is warm, responsive, visibly alive in her own body, suspicion gathers around her just as quickly. Not because pleasure harms anyone, but because pleasure in a woman begins to look like independence, and independence is dangerous. The rules grow dense around ordinary life. Certain days are considered unfit for intercourse. Certain seasons narrow the acceptable window still further. Feast days, fast days, holy days. The marriage bed is never entirely separate from the calendar of the church. Even timing becomes moralized. Even the body must learn to move according to ritual. And confession waits behind it all. A thought may become shame before it has even become an action. A touch may be remembered in guilt. A wife may kneel in dim light and wonder whether she has sinned not by refusing desire, but by feeling it at all. Candles burn softly. A priest listens. Words are lowered into the quiet, but the quiet does not always bring relief. Sometimes it only teaches the soul to distrust its own warmth. That is the deeper suffocation of it. Pleasure is not merely ignored. It is treated as spiritually dangerous. A woman is asked to live inside a contradiction so complete it can scarcely be resolved. She must be fertile, but not lustful, available, but not eager, faithful, but not hungry. She must enter the bed and leave no trace of wanting in herself. So the room grows quieter, candlelight on wood, prayer after dark, a house settling around the last sounds of the evening. And somewhere within that hush, the bed begins to change its meaning. It is no longer only furniture, no longer only a place of marriage, exhaustion, or duty. It begins to feel like part of the sermon itself, a place where theology presses down into linen, into silence, into the body. And all of this comes down, night after night, to the same creaking place. And all of this comes down, night after night, to the same creaking place. The bed remains where it has always been, waiting in the half-dark, like a piece of the house that has learned too much. Ropes drawn tight beneath a wooden frame, straw pressed flat in some places, lumpy in others. A blanket holding the last of the body's warmth at the center, and none of it at the edge. The smell is familiar now. Smoke in the cloth, old sleep in the linen, a little damp in the wood, breath rising and falling in the dark from more than one corner of the room. Because the room is never far away, a child may be sleeping nearby, a servant may be turned toward the wall, pretending not to hear. Somewhere beyond the bed, there is the faint settling of the house, the last red pulse of embers in the hearth, the soft complaint of timber cooling after the day. Even silence is shared here. Even darkness has witnesses, so the bed is asked to carry more than rest. It holds exhaustion. It holds duty. It holds repetition. A wife enters it not as a heroine in some romantic tale, but as someone returning to a task that may come dressed in the language of marriage and still feel in the body like labor. The sheets must be straightened, the straw shaken, the the blanket lifted, the body made ready, or at least made still, night after night, the same frame, the same closeness, the same expectation settling over the mattress like another layer of cloth. That is what changes the meaning of the bed. In another kind of story, it might be refuge, a warm corner of privacy, a place where the body softens into safety. But here, it is something else. It is routine, it is obligation, it is one more surface on which the household works out its will. In this world, the bed is less a refuge than a workplace. And yet, the sadness of it is quiet rather than loud. A few embers glow and then dim. The room breathes through old boards and tired fabric. Someone turns over in sleep. Someone sighs. A draft moves lightly at the shutter. The dark does what it can to soften the edges of things, to hide the stains, the insects, the nearness of other lives. For a few moments, the whole house seems suspended between weariness and silence, as if it too would like to rest. So let the scene cool a little. Let it become still again. The bed remains there. Under the hush of the room, plain and overburdened, carrying bodies, heat, duty, and the slow repetition of years. It is only wood, rope, straw, and cloth. And yet it has become the place where so much of a woman's life is spent being claimed, measured, and put to use. And yet, what is forbidden never disappears. It simply goes underground. And yet, what is forbidden never disappears. It simply goes underground. Beyond the lawful marriage bed, Tudor England holds other rooms, dimmer ones, where desire and survival take on quieter, stranger shape. Here the body is still watched, still judged, still vulnerable to scandal. But it is also trying, in whatever small ways it can, to slip the rules that have closed so tightly around it. Some women turn to herbs, not for beauty or comfort, but for timing, delay, prevention, hope. A bitter tea, a handful of crushed seeds, a remedy passed in whispers from one woman to another, never fully trusted, and yet still tried. Others, more desperate, attempt to end what has already begun, risking pain, bleeding, fever, perhaps death, because the future ahead of them feels even more dangerous. And around all of this hovers the old suspicion that a woman who knows too much about her own body may be edging toward witchcraft. That fear is never far away. A woman who prevents pregnancy too often, or loses it too suddenly, or lives too freely, may draw the kind of attention that turns private survival into public menace. The same world that denies her knowledge may punish her for seeking it. The same culture that demands fertility may also condemn the means by which she tries to protect herself from it. Elsewhere, in the towns and cities, survival takes another form. Brothels remain part of the social fabric, whether moralists like it or not. Some women are driven there by poverty, abandonment, widowhood, coercion, or the slow exhaustion of having too few choices left. Inside those rooms, desire becomes entangled with money, danger, bargaining, disease, and the constant nearness of violence. The pox waits in the background of such places, feared and half understood, carried through bodies that have already been made vulnerable by hunger and dependence. At court, the risks are dressed more elegantly, but they are risks all the same. A glance can be misread, a letter can be found, a favorite can fall. Women near power live inside an atmosphere where attraction and danger brush against each other constantly, and scandal can travel faster than truth. A body may be adorned in silk and still remain exposed. And then there are the affections that do not fit the official story at all. A hand held too long, a tenderness hidden inside friendship, a coded letter, a look that says what speech cannot safely carry. Queer feeling has no stable shelter here, only fragments, hints, evasions, the soft private knowledge that some bonds exist most truthfully when they are least visible. Desire finds margins because margins are where it can still breathe. Even writing begins to hide there, a poem copied quietly, an erotic passage passed from hand to hand, a page concealed in a chest or sewn into a binding. Not because pleasure has become free, but because it has become secret. The system tried to define desire, but desire kept slipping sideways. That may be the most haunting truth of all, even in a world so punitive, so watchful, so eager to turn bodies into duty. People still invent hidden ways to want, to bargain, to survive, to remember themselves as more than usefulness alone. Not safely, not often happily, but persistently. So let these shadowed lives remain low-lit, a whispered remedy, a shuttered room, a dangerous letter folded closed, a feeling that cannot live in daylight, yet refuses to die. And after all that secrecy, all that shame, all that survival, the only honest way to end is to return to the room you are actually in now. And after all that secrecy, all that shame, all that survival, return now to the room you are actually in. To the pillow beneath your head, to the slow weight of your own blanket, to the quiet mercy of a door that closes, of water that runs, of knowledge that can be spoken plainly, of a life in which the body may still belong, at least in part, to the self. Feel the distance between your breathing now and that older world we have been walking through. Let that distance widen, let it become gentle, because this story was never really about scandal, not in the end. Not about gossip or lace or the thrill of forbidden things. It was about what happens when intimacy is taken out of the heart and handed over to structure. When marriage becomes duty before tenderness, when the bed becomes proof, when the body becomes labor, when fear is folded so neatly into ordinary life that people begin to mistake endurance for virtue. That is the ache that remains. You have been moving through a world where many women were not asked to flourish, only to survive. To endure the room, the rules, the watching eyes, the marriage bed, the childbirth bed, the shame, the silence, the long repetition of usefulness. To survive first, and only afterward, if there was anything left, to become a self in the narrow spaces between demands. So let your body grow heavier now, not with their burden, but with release from it. Let your jaw unclench, let your shoulders settle, let your hands rest where they have fallen. Feel the dark of your room as something kind. Feel the pillow take your weight without asking anything back. Let the breath lengthen, soften, drift, in, out, nothing to prove, nothing to perform, nothing to survive tonight except sleep itself. And still, one quiet truth remains at the edge of the candlelight. The past is gone, but some of its echoes are not. They linger in the old stories people still tell about purity, about shame, about what a body is for, about who gets to name desire and who must apologize for. Not as loudly as before, not in the same rooms, but sometimes, faintly, they remain so. Let the thought pass softly through you and keep drifting. The room is dark, the air is still, your body is here, and the candle lowers a little more.